and welcome. This is Vivica Williams and you're watching Head to Head on UATV. The Ukraine Reform Conference took place in Kyiv on February 20th. It was a high-level international meeting that gathered top officials, including the Prime Minister, the Ukrainian Head of Parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, as well as ministers and ambassadors from Ukrainian allies such as Britain and Denmark. So how successful is Ukraine doing in implementing the reforms, and what are the next steps? To answer these questions, we are joined in the studio by Aliona Shkrum, Ukrainian Parliament Member. Thank you so much for being with us, Aliona.
Thank you for inviting me.
So can you tell us right off the bat, what were some of the things that came up in the meeting, and what are some of the reforms that really need to be implemented that haven't been working so far?
Well, first of all, I think that Ukraine had a lot of conferences and a lot of forums about reforms and where we want to go, what we want to do. But this was one of the big meetings which was talking about the implementation. Because we have passed a number of very good, very radical, in a good sense, democratic pro-European laws, like the law on the civil service, which I was working at for 2 years, like the law on the educational reform, which overwhelmingly coalition and opposition voted for. But now the main idea and the main problem we are facing, where we are actually slowing down, is that we are not implementing the reforms in the right way. And of course, the Cabinet of Ministers is responsible a lot for implementation. And this is a good thing that the Cabinet of Ministers realizes right now, that the reform is not to pass something through the Parliament and to, to sign, to make like a plus for the homework well done, right? Yeah. But the problem is to implement it. And to implement it, there is a number of steps we have to do, specifically in a country where we still have a lot of old civil servants, old methods, old processes. And it is very hard, of course. So I'm very happy that the focus of the reform was not about adding new check marks to the list, but was about how to implement the reforms that are already there, but not implemented, like the educational reform. The healthcare reform is quite a disaster in implementation. We have just started to implement it, but the Cabinet of Ministers needs to realize it is a very painful and very radical reform to implement, so you have to do it correctly. The civil service reform and the whole reform of the governance of Ukraine, it is a reform that will not be implemented even in 1 year. But the people,
take a long time, right?
But the people need to feel positive results at least this year. Otherwise, the people will not, consider the reforms to be successful, because the reforms should be a specific positive result for everybody, for me, for you, for everybody on a Ukrainian street, that he can feel that the economy is growing up a little bit, that the level of services from the government are getting better, that the level of health care or education for his kids is getting better. And this is the homework we need to do for this year. This is what we were talking about.
And this has been an issue in the past, is this poor communication and demonstration with the community, with society, to show these changes. I think a lot of people say there haven't been reforms, nothing has changed. With you and I know that this is incorrect, but it's the ability to demonstrate. So you're saying that you see that the Cabinet of Ministers is understanding now that they really need some help with being able to do these reforms.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they feel that they do not have a lot of time to do it. And I think their communication strategy is getting much better. Even the communication with MPs, for example. I am an MP from Batkivshchina fraction, so from the opposition. But the level of communication with me is much better than it has been 2 years ago, when the opposition was not invited even to the table. So we would do the reforms in Rada, we would vote for them, we would work on the bills, but then we would be thrown out of the implementation process. And then, of course, we would criticize for not implementing the proper clauses we put in the bills and the proper ideas. But now I think the government understands the necessity to show positive results, but it is a lack of political will to do changes and radical changes, and the lack of knowing how to do them.
Well, and a lot of it does also come, as you said, from this inability, the lack of ability to implement. So do you see that, for example, the Council of Europe is giving money to help with learning how to implement the reform there? So do you see that this is going to lead, seeing this change in Parliament, seeing the change in ministries, possibility, seeing that there is going to be some capacity building?
So when I was first elected to the parliament 3.5 years ago, I actually thought and believed that the first reform we should do is a reform of the civil service, because specifically any reform would be implemented by the civil servants and by politicians in the regions of Ukraine, in the small cities, in the small villages. And we have the lack of, well, first trust to the civil service and to politicians, and then the lack of skills how to implement the reform. So everything can be done perfectly, but on the lowest, level, there still be no implementation, or there would be actually so much not trust in the reforms that people would be specifically damaging the idea. So right now we have a lot of cooperation with the European Union, with Denmark, with Switzerland, with Sweden, with Poland, with a lot of countries who were actually present at the round table you discussed about, how to give the necessary skills, the necessary education, and the necessary, skill sets to the civil servants to implement specific reforms. And now we receive a lot of money from the European Union specifically to train and to pay more to the new civil servants who would come and be professional in policy making and policy implementation. And we have right now a pilot project in 10 ministries, so not all of them, but in 10 ministries with new civil service elected on open competition basis, with new quite high salaries based on the money we receive from the European Union, and with new responsibilities specifically in implementing the policies in Ukraine. And if we will see the result, I think this would be a great thing, because we can then put it to all of the ministries, to all of the regions of Ukraine, to all of the oblasts in Ukraine, and we'll see the result. But of course,
how long ago did this start?
This just started. Let me see. So the financing started in December of, actually 1st of January. The process has started in November, October, so it's already going quite fast. But of course, we need success stories and we need win stories. So I believe, for example, in the educational reform, I think that could be a quite successful reform where people will see in a small village that there is a difference in how the education is being pursued, in how the higher education is working, that you can actually go and enter the university based on your merits, not based on your parents' profession, so money or bribes, whatever. And it is working. I've seen a big change. But of course, it needs to be in every specific direction.
So when are you looking to have some outcome from this?
Well, I was looking to have outcome 2 years ago, right? So of course, we are not moving as fast as we want to be moving. But I think that, in the times when Ukraine is at war with Russian Federation, when Ukraine is losing some of the best, very talented people during these times of war, I think that everybody in the country needs to do what he can do in a certain position and what is necessary to do a step by step, small step by small step. Well, for example, I'm also working on decentralization reform, which means giving more money to the regions of Ukraine.
Right.
And this is for the first time in history of Ukraine when people who come to me, to my committee in Verkhovna Rada, in the parliament, they say that we have actually received a lot of money. We don't know what to spend them on. We don't know what to do with them. Teach us the best practices of the European Union, how to be competitive, how to raise tourist awareness, how to give better services. And this is what I see is a very good sign. Absolutely. But again, we need to work in every direction because so many things have to be done
at the
so
same
fast.
time.
Yeah.
And also, it is a lot about teaching and instructing and how to use it.
Exactly, because during the times of Soviet Union, nobody was allowed, if you become the mayor of a small village, you did not have enough money. You had to go back to Kyiv to beg for any money, and then Kyiv would decide for you, or Moscow would decide for you how to spend money in your village. But now people have these possibilities. They need to get the trainings, the skills, the different psychology a little bit, and they need to provide certain changes very fast for the people to believe in them.
Absolutely. Well, and we have a lot to look forward to this year, and hopefully we're going to hear about it, and we're going to see it, and we're going to see some change in how people are feeling and how the government's working.
We don't have another choice. Otherwise, we don't have another choice. We have to be successful, and we have to win at least certain parts of certain reforms. And well, I hope that a lot of them will have the positive, successful cases.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And that was Aliona Shkrum, Ukrainian Parliament Member. Thank you for watching.